Can you have financial freedom in Australia? Welcome to the Red Black Podcast with your hosts, Warner and Mario. Mario, go ahead.
Can you have financial freedom in Australia? I guess it depends, Warner, on the rules. It basically comes down to the framework. What is the framework? Can we agree on the framework? So it depends, and it's unclear right now. I guess we'll start off with talking about what is totalitarian rule. How does that look in Europe? How did that look in the history books? And what are we experiencing today? I also want to talk and get your opinion about democracies or Western democracies, or as you would say, republics, Plato republics. And so we can kind of compare and contrast. Where can you have financial freedom? And is Australia one of those countries, or was it? And is it not going to be? So let's just get into it. So totalitarian rule has to do with a totality of control. That's the root of that word, is totality of control. There is no right to assemble. Your right to assemble is limited. Definitely, if you want to run a business, you need to assemble your employees. You need to assemble wise counsel. You need to assemble advisors. You need to assemble, potentially bring in people that are experts in different parts, subject matter experts in different parts that you could maybe advise you or consult you. You have to have the right to assemble to have financial freedom. It's paramount to have financial freedom. You also need the right to speak. You have to have the free and open communication lines. You have to be able to communicate with your employees and your friends and your business partners. Again, all those folks, you have to have the right to free. And you need to be able to apply money to that. So not only do you have the right to speak, but you have the right to turbocharge that speech with money. I can turbocharge my speech with money. We can advertise on LinkedIn. We can advertise on Facebook, on social media platforms. You also have to have the right to basically have press, to be able to communicate through press releases, to be able to take out ads in newspapers, to be able to express your business desires and your desires through media. Traditional newspapers, now it's really YouTube and Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram. In totalitarian rule, you don't have that. If you have any disparaging remarks to make against the government, you go to the gulags. So would you agree or add or anything? What are your thoughts on that one?
Those are great points. Let's go back to the U.S. Constitution, like freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, interstate commerce, all that type of stuff, right? What they're saying and what it goes back to is the article and the podcast we did on the root of money. When you drill this down to its basic essence, you know me, I like to go right down to the root. And at the root of it all is you and I being able to freely communicate, produce something, and then freely share that across this country. Now, there was a document put in place, a few documents, Bill of Rights, Constitution, which guarantees that. Now, the only thing keeping those two documents from being burned up is our possession of certain boomsticks, we'll call them. And our ability, the most important, is our ability to still believe in those principles. So if you take a look at Australia, for example, they have a constitution. One of the areas in Australia called up the army, like a local governor, but he wasn't allowed to do that, but he stepped over the constitution. So what's going on in Australia right now, if the people, this is a challenge, if the people had power, that's where the power comes from. And the second this happened, they would go to the premier's house or the president's house. They would go to the assembly. They pull all those guys out, be like, "You're fired. Get the hell out of here." If you really had a powerful populace, to go to every cop's home, say, "Do not show up again on this street." It's going to mean.
That's right. No, we want your resignation. No,
we're going to your resignation.
We show up. We peacefully show up and we state with a mass protest. We peacefully say,
exactly, because
we want you to step down. We want you to step down from power because we consent to be ruled based on this framework. Like you said, the right to assemble, the right to free speech, the right to interstate commerce. We've agreed to this framework. We would call it a constitution, a Bill of Rights. Let me get into that a little bit. Madison wanted Bill of Rights. James Madison wanted Bill of Rights. This is going to be, I'm going back a long time here for American history. Thomas Jefferson, who wanted a constitution, and Madison was running against it for president for a Bill of Rights. He lost to Thomas Jefferson that election, and Thomas Jefferson got a constitution of the United States. Madison, a couple of years later, got elected, and we also got a Bill of Rights. So in our country, the legal documents that we consent to be ruled over based on a framework, which is the Constitution of the United States and the Bill of Rights. In Australia, they have something very similar. In Canada, they have something very similar. In Great Britain, they have something very similar. In New Zealand, I speak to those countries because I've served with their officers and their enlisted folks, both domestically in the United States of America in a place called 29 Palms, California. It's a big military base the Marine Corps owns. I've also served with them in Afghanistan, Iraq, Australia, and New Zealand. So, and I'm really, I'm very fond of the Australian military. Right now, we have exchange officers. I've worked with several exchange officers, but I literally work desk to desk with an exchange officer in Hawaii. So I've spent years and years working alongside the Australian Army. So I can speak to their Western democracy / republic, and it is virtually the same thing. It's a copy of an American Constitution without the boomsticks, and that's a very key distinguishing aspect between America and Australia. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, let's go back to the language. If you listen to the language that a lot of people use in the US and Australia, think about how the power has transitioned from the people to the people in charge. And here's why. Listen to the language. People will say in their language, we have to go to our politicians to get things open back up. No, 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 no. You open back up.
That's right.
They say something that's illegal or against the authority of the people. You don't go to them to get permission. You open back. That's where the power to have like a free capitalist society where you have, and the reason why Mari and I are talking about this, because this whole podcast is committed to financial freedom. And if you don't have personal freedoms, you don't have financial freedoms. You can still do it.
That's right.
And Mario talked about this the other day, but it requires getting outside that system and going off the grid or into a homestead or into a tight-knit community where you all agree on that. But the key point I want to say to anyone listening to this podcast in the US and Australia, you don't go ask them for your permission. Here's an example. In Moscow, I think the governor of Moscow, or the mayor of Moscow had a dictate which saying if you had a jab, then you could go shop at these businesses. And if you didn't have a jab, you couldn't. It was all local businesses, restaurants, whatever else, right? And basically the people of Moscow said, F you. And they banded together, jab, non-jab, and they said, we're not shopping at any of your businesses. That dude's phone, the mayor, started ringing off the hook, getting so many complaints from the local business owners going, what the heck are you doing? He saw where that was going. He's like, if I don't solve this soon, these dudes, these big Russians are going to be on my doorstep doing Spetsnaz level stuff to me that I don't want to have done to me. I'm going to release it back open. So see, the thing is what people don't realize is the government, it's the people who are in charge. We gave them the power. The Australians gave them the power. You don't have to go back and ask for your right to do commerce. It's in your constitution. They're shutting it down. We open up. And that's the basis of creating financial freedom, to freely produce your goods and service and sell it. If someone's cramping down on that, they're slyly through their language and their subversion and emergency and this and that saying, oh no, we have to shut you down. No, you don't have to shut you down. I take my own risk and I stay open for the livelihood, because what they're really doing is they're shutting down the livelihood of these communities and transitioning that power to an organization or a government that will now control them. That's what they don't realize. You are no longer in a free economy. That's my point. Go ahead.
There's two types of men in this world, Warner. There's men you can push around, and there's men you cannot push around. There is pipe swingers in Russia you cannot push around. There's dudes in Wyoming you cannot push around. There's dudes in LA you can push around. And what happened is those people in Moscow melted the phone of that mayor. They basically started saying this is not going to happen. And he could see there's an escalation of force happening. He can see this is a bad road we're going down. This is a dark road we're going down. Okay, I misspoke. I didn't mean that. The jab or no jab, you conduct your life as you need to support your family, to take care of your children, to take care of your wife, to take care of your family. You do what you need to do. And I encourage you to take care, take proper health procedures that are going to help you out in that process. But he backed down because, again, there's two types of men, and big Russians, they're not the type. Most of those guys are not the type you push around. I would say, Stalin, he had totalitarianism. He was able to have totality of control from 1924 to 1953. That's 29 years in the Soviet Union that he ran that place, and he put people in gulags. He had his own private police. If you said something disparaging, he could just put you in a gulag. He could put you in a concentration camp. And I want to come back to that later on as we're in this discussion, is that we're seeing things in Australia we've never seen in Western democracies before against their own people. We've seen them in America during World War II. We've seen these other places where you're potentially, gaining intel on enemy combatants inside your country, but we've never seen this type of language. So we'll get to that. But going back to Stalin, 29 years. If you go to the Old Testament, you read First and Second Kings and First and Second Chronicles. There's some horrible kings of Israel. There's some horrible kings. Very few of them lasted 29 years. So Joseph Stalin, to last that long, he ruled with absolute brutality. Absolute brutality. Not that Hitler was a nice guy, a savage of a dictator, but compared to Stalin, Hitler was light. It was light Stalinism compared to Joseph Stalin. That dude, it was unbelievable. You couldn't leave. You couldn't leave the Soviet Union. You could leave Germany. You could actually leave. If you were a wealthy dude, you could actually walk out of Germany, and you could actually dissent against parts of Nazi Germany, specifically Hitler, on religious basis. He had lots of Christians in there that did not support him, and they dissented against him in their assemblies, and he didn't shut them down. He didn't kill them. He didn't throw them in concentration camps. Thoughts on that, Warner?
Yeah, so I want to break down the terminology that we're using and how it applies to like creating financial freedom. Because another channel, George Gammon, he always talks about this. He's like, I can have $1 billion, but if I can't use it, if I have no financial freedom, it's worthless. And what that points to is basically the root core of what I was talking about, and the root of money, which is you and I producing goods and services and being able to trade it. The whole point of the government is really just securing. Like, we've gotten so out of whack. It's really just securing borders and making sure people aren't killing themselves, killing each other. Right? It's just to really keep sort of law in order. But when you start stepping into people's free right to do interstate commerce, to freely exchange services, what you're really doing is you're not allowing people to fully express themselves. That's what a business is. You and your employees, like we talked about this in terms of brand. There's 4 aspects to the brand. And there's could probably be some other groups, but there's community, there's the employee, there's the investors, and then there's the customer. Customer being number one. I mean, they're all number one on a different level, but the customers, because that's who you're selling to, that's where the value lies between the customer and the product. But if your employees and your investors and everyone else isn't enrolled in the brand and the business, eventually that business is going to crumble, right? So it's the free exchange of value. When an investor's coming into that business, he's giving you his value. He's giving you his freely expressed value. When an employee come in, they're giving you whatever skill set they're really good at, they're giving that to you. What totalitarianism means, I, one person, control you. And we've been in that organization, the military, a form of it, where I understand the military, the Marine Corps has a certain way you have to have that control to execute troops on a battlefield. If you had like a free willing, and the special operations community is a little bit different because they're smaller and they can move quicker. But in a bigger force, it requires everyone to kind of stay in their lane and do what they're supposed to do. It's needed. But when you're talking about a free market, open, free society, and you start having totalitarian control, that means one dude or whatever, it's socialism, a group of people are controlling. Socialism is like a light form of communism, totalitarianism. They control everything. So when you look at this whole thing, I want you to think about it. There's like libertarianism, where it's like, I'm free to produce and exchange. Totalitarianism is I'm told what to produce and exchange. And that's like, if you keep my 2 fingers, totalitarianism, freedom, and then there's like a line between it that's telling you where you are, a scale telling you where you are. And we're like over here in Australia. So what that means is people can't even freely produce for themselves. if you look at the root of it, they can't produce for their family and for themselves. So now they're relying on this individual. And in those types of societies, there's a lot of death. There's a lot of poverty. There's inefficiency of market allocation of resources. And what you don't have is you don't have financial freedom. And financial freedom could be different things for different people. It could be you're storing up wealth. It could be you have a farm. You're freely expressing how you're building up your goods and services and where you're putting it. Yeah, go ahead.
Great points, Warner. I want to speak about two people and then my personal experience. So I grew up with a gentleman. I'm going to use his name because he's a public figure, John Lilick. He grew up in communist Yugoslavia, a country that doesn't exist anymore. And he told me about what life was like. So I'm getting this first person account of what life was like under totalitarian rule in communist Yugoslavia. Then he immigrated to Canada, and then his dad became an engineer at Boeing, and his mom had cancer and got some really world-class cancer treatment at the University of Washington, I think Harborview Hospital, which is connected to the University of Washington. I also have a lady in Chicago who grew up, I'm not going to mention her name, she's not a public figure, I'm going to just call her the dog walker as a quick call sign for her. She'll know who I'm talking about. She grew up in communist Poland. Okay, so it's another first-person account, first-person eyewitness account of what it was like to grow up in communist Poland. And like Warner was saying, the inefficiencies, the backwards control of the people is unbelievable. Now, Warner and I have both lived in totalitarian rule within the Marine Corps. I've spent a couple more years than Warner has. I think you did about 8-9 years. And on top of that, I've lived in a prison cell for 7 months in my life. So you're like, whoa, you went to prison? Not exactly. I lived in a little town called Lashkar, Afghanistan. Lashkar. You'll hear it in the news recently. I lived in a prison in Lashkar for 7 months with 2 British officers. That was the safest place for us to do our business, was inside of a prison cell. I could leave during the day. I could go out in town. I could go. Warner knows what I did. We worked together. That's where I met Warner. But I literally lived in a prison cell for 7 months of my life. I'm not going back to living in a prison cell. Warner's not going to be back. Warner's not a caged animal. Warner's not going to be in a cage. So we'll pivot. So just don't just listen to what we say. Also watch what we do. Warner and I are not going to be under this kind of rule. So is this coming to America? Is this coming to other Western democracies or Western republics? That's to be determined. Some of our leaders have told us, which I believe them. I want to say that I believe our leaders when they say this. It's going to be a dark winter. What does that mean? I don't know, but I believe them. When they say that, I believe them. So I want to get into Australia. Warner, I want to kind of get your opinion on what is an edict and what is a law, and just kind of talk about where Australia is right now. They're on the tip of the spear of transitioning from a Western democracy, a republic, into totalitarian rule. So right now, let's just go back in just 1 year, rewind 1 year in Australia. In 2020, the Australian people had over 200 days in hard lockdown. 200 days in hard lockdown. Okay, that's an edict that they were not free to assemble. I'm gonna bring up Hebrews 10, 24, and 25 real quick, because Warner and I during this time were in Hawaii, and we continued to, again, a little higher authority in our minds. We continued to meet for dinner. We continued to meet for surfing. We continued to meet for workouts. We continued to do life. Hebrews 10, 24, and 25 says, "And let us consider how we may spur one another on towards love and good deeds." Let me read that again. Let us consider how we may spur one another on towards love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together. Not giving up meeting together. So interesting. We're not going to give up meeting together. Warner and I, 4 months of lockdown in Hawaii, didn't affect us. I had a military ID. I could move freely on the island, and Warner he was part of the 1% up on the North Shore, so they didn't harass him at all. So yeah, 200 days in lockdown last year. Any thoughts on that, Warner? Edict or a law?
Yeah, so let's break down those two terms very quickly, because it's the basis of what I was talking about in terms of the root of money. An edict is not an agreement. You don't have an agreement among the people and the individuals that they put in place to rule over them. Maybe that's not the right term, to rule over them. It's really sort of to watch their backs, because that's who you're putting in a place of power. You're giving them a power, so they're really watching your backs to keep you safe, to keep the roads functioning, keep however your society's set up, right? So when you have an edict that most people don't agree with, or you do it in a way that's deceptive, that's not an agreement between the people that gave you power and those people. You're telling them, that's totalitarian. You're telling them what to do. Think about any edict that you have in an organization, in a company where someone says, well, you have to do this, and the majority of the company doesn't like it. You're going to lose most of your employees. The challenge with Australia, it's an island, and the current situation where nowadays, people can't get off of it. So the individuals that run that country now know this. So an edict.
Well, you can't. Let me jump in here, Warner. You can get off of it. You have to have mobility options. You have to have a sailboat. You have to have a yacht. You have to have private aviation. You're right. The middle class can't leave. The lower class can't leave. The wealthy can always leave.
Exactly. So that goes into another podcast we did about mobility, and all these things are tied to financial freedom, because financial freedom at the end of the day is really being able to do what you want with your finances, and that goes towards an agreement. An agreement is like the Constitution. We agreed. People come in this country legally, make an agreement, and they're naturalized to be part of that Constitution, part of that Bill of Rights. There's a certain way they operate, and that's why most people from around the world, they come to this country because of that document and because of the entrepreneurial spirit that document created. So the difference between an agreement and an edict is I'm forcing you to do something. An agreement is we agree between two parties to do something. If you want to know the most powerful way to create a society, you allow people to agree to do things, to enter into business agreements. Your one red flag that you're entering in to a totalitarian society is like California. You can no longer collect rent from your tenants. And people are like, they shift it in this way where like, oh, you're a bad landlord. No. You had an agreement, the tenant, with the landlord to live in that place. You lost your job. That's on you. It sounds harsh, but it's not. It creates a society where you have responsibility, right? And then it actually teaches you a lesson. All of us that are in business, that are listening to this podcast know, especially in the Marine Corps, we've been taught hard lessons where it's like, you make a mistake flying. I multiple times, Mario, where if I made one mistake, I was flying into a Japanese power lines and that was the end of it. Or if I didn't do the emergency procedures fast enough, we're going into the ground. So
yeah, death, the consequences for making a mistake in our line of business where people ourselves could get killed or people that we care about that we're leading could get killed. There's the consequences for hard lessons. You want to talk about hard lessons. You're right. When you sign an agreement, it sounds harsh, but you didn't set your life up, or you didn't have an emergency fund. And again, there's places to go, but to occupy someone's private property for 14 months or 18 months and break your agreement it's not right. It's not.
Well, it's not right. It has no integrity. It has no integrity because you see what you're doing is you're destroying a society, and most people don't realize. You think you're being compassionate, you're actually not being compassionate, because then that individual is now knowing he can take advantage of other people. And what people don't realize about the breakage of an agreement, there's a break in integrity and there's an impact, and that impact impacts the other side. If it's a small landlord, he can't pay his mortgage. Maybe he can't put food on the table now for his family. Over 50% of the small or 50% of the rental properties in the U.S. are like these small mom and pops. It's a huge part. The small business, used to be 50%. Huge generator, right? So what you're doing is you're having an impact on the integrity of that business. That business has an agreement with that state to do business. Now you're saying you can't do business anymore. Well, the ramifications, the impact of that are basically, well, we're just gonna, the ramifications are that those individuals don't pay their mortgage, they don't pay their rent. If they're paying rent to someone else, they're not giving their money to the grocery store to get food. It impacts the grocery store. There's this cascading effect just because one dude said, well, I'm just going to stay there and not pay you. That's the challenge. That's another form of an edict. That guy's saying to that landlord, well, now they told me that I don't have to leave, so I'm going to tell you I don't have to leave. That your tenant has now given you an edict saying, I'm not getting out of here. And when you have that type of environment, You don't have a free entrepreneurial environment. You cannot create value, which creates resources, which creates financial freedom.
I'm going to steer it back to Australia because I touch a nerve. I touch a personal nerve with you in the state of California. So going back, so right now, when we hear the words, it's going to be a dark winter, we have to understand that in the southern hemisphere right now, in Australia, it's the wintertime. So June, July, August, definitely the wintertime in Australia. So they are going through a hard lockdown. New Zealand did it, I think, a little bit before Australia. I'm getting different source documents, and I might have this slightly wrong, but this is what I'm hearing. This is what I'm reading. You need to remain within 1 kilometer, or I've also heard 5 kilometers your house. I can't go across town. I can't go 10 kilometers. For some reason, I have to stay within 1 kilometer or 5 kilometers of my own house. Edict or law. Okay, I'm going to keep going so we can keep momentum here. You need to be back inside your house at 9 p.m., between 9 p.m. and 5 a.m. For some reason, the cerveza sickness doesn't affect people between 5 a.m. and 9 p.m. at night, but at 9 p.m. it gets crazy. So you're not allowed to be outside of your house between 9 p.m. and 5 a.m. curfew. We're just going to establish that, edict or law. You're allowed to go outside of your house for 1 hour a day, presumably for exercise. 2-hour bike rides. I just rode up and had coffee with Warner yesterday. I did 44 miles up to his house. I had dinner, spent the night, and then rode 44 miles back to my place. You're not allowed to do that. 1 hour. 1 hour. You're allowed to exercise 1 hour. 2-hour surf sessions, 3-hour bike rides. No, 1 hour. Edict or law, Warner?
These are all edicts, and here's what I want to point it back to, because we've gotten so far from, I'm not saying we all should be living in an agrarian society, but I want our listeners to think about, I want you to take all those edicts. I'm not going to call them laws because they're not, I don't think they're law-abiding laws. They're just edicts. It's very, very poignant that Mario states it that way. I want you to think about, you're a farmer or you're out in the bush and you're living off grid. Could you survive off of all those edicts? No way in heck. You're required to go get water every day. Maybe you're going to go out and hunt. Maybe you've got to go wash clothes in the stream. Maybe you're just going to go for a hike to clear your head. Maybe you have to fix a fence. I mean, we're in this society now where it's like, we provide everything for you, so we're just going to cut you off and we're going to give you what you need. That is a completely insane society that will literally go real fast into totalitarianism, and you have no financial freedom. You have no freedom, period, in that type of society. So always think about, I always say this, if you want to understand the monetary system or a money system or a value system, always go back, think of like an Amish farm. Or like in Australia, think of an Aboriginal, indigenous people that live out in the bush. You tell them, you're only going to go out for an hour a day. Are you out of your mind? That's how far we've got from how value is created. It's created by exchanging goods and services. And if we were all like all us individuals now in Australia, the US, were responsible for making our own food, there'd be a revolt. They'd be like, you have literally, dude that created that or gal that created that, you literally have 5 hours to repeal that, or the whole village is going to be at your doorstep. Because you're saying you're going to do this, it's a huge situation, then you provide all that. But everything is so out of whack nowadays that it's so easy to put people, and it picks a pet peeve with me, because what you're really doing is, we all have these God-given abilities and all these traits that create this wonderful world that we can all go out and create goods and services and exchange with people. And what you're doing is you're saying, all of you get in your cage, don't get out. And that, as Mario and I, with sworn like oaths to the Constitution, it's like, dog. You're not pulling that on most Americans, because what you're doing is you're saying our livelihood, who we are as individuals, you're going to squash that. Are you out of your mind? For individuals that if you met them on the side of the street and you talk to them, you'd be like, this is a weak dude. They're standing behind badges and police and all sorts of, I mean, to give you an example, if they're going to make your life a living nightmare, go make the prime minister's life a living nightmare. Surround his house every night. Don't allow him to go to work. Don't allow the food truck to come in to resupply him. Make every single cop's life a living. And why I'm saying this, do this in a peaceful manner, but it's really is enough. Is enough. These individuals are robbing you of your livelihood. your God-given rights to basically promote who you are as an individual and go out, produce goods and services that have an impact, a positive impact on people's lives. And they're like, you can't do any of that. Get in your cage, slave. It pisses me off, man. Go ahead.
All right, deep breath, Warner. It's going to get worse. It's going to get worse. We're like two or three points into this. You must register with the Australian government who you are living with. Let me read that again. You must register with the Australian government who you're living with. Edict or law?
That's a straight up. There's no agreement. They're telling you to do something.
So I got to tell you where my kids are. I got to tell you where my wife is. I got to tell you where my brother-in-law is. I got to tell you, I have to disclose to the Australian government exactly who is living in my house.
Let's get this language straight. You don't have to do anything. They're tricking you into submitting to it. As law, it's an edict.
Go ahead. You must. Let me read this again. You must register with the Australian government who you are living with.
Yeah, it's a straight up edict.
Yeah, so you have no right to privacy. Your privacy. I need to know exactly where you're at all times and who's living with you. Mask mandates at all times. Riding by yourself. You're riding your bike by yourself out in the open. You're out in the open country of Australia, riding your bicycle by yourself. You must have a mask on. You have to have a diaper on your face. You have to have something covering the two orifices that you use to breathe at all times. You're in your car by yourself, Warner. You're in your car driving by yourself with the windows rolled up. You must have edict or law, Warner.
This is all designed to destroy people's livelihood and their productivity. And livelihood and productivity is the base of a free economy with goods and services, and that produces financial freedom. If you're like overcome with fear and you can't get outside yourself or your house or wherever you are, and you can't do the normal things that you love to do. Say you're a triathlete or you're a professional surfer and you surf 8 hours a day. You can't do that. You're literally squashing people's passions. And Mario and I know this. We've been in the military. We have to, we made a choice to go in. It was volunteer. It's a great organization, phenomenal, met one of the best group of people I've ever met, got the best training I've ever gotten in management, hands down Marine Corps, best training in the world. A bunch of great things. And there's some things that I didn't like the bureaucracy and how they, in certain situations, they didn't allow your creativity to explode. And we had a podcast with Daniel Gomez, which we'll link below, who talked about he's bringing creativity to the DoD, the Department of Defense. But that's the thing, man. They're destroying. See, at its root, I always like to get to the root of what everything's going on, and they're destroying your creativity. And your creativity is what creates these wonderful goods and services that improves people's lives, creates financial freedom, and it enriches everyone else. So yeah, keep going.
So if you're training for a triathlon for 1 hour, you're legally allowed to be outside for 1 hour. You're riding by yourself on a tri bike, or you're swimming, or you're running for 1 hour. You have to
put a mask. Here's a simple way to determine. To see what's going on with that in terms of performance. Go out and do a ride for an hour, right? See your performance level, heart rate, how far you went, how fast you went, your RPMs. Put the mask on to get the same amount of rest. Do it 1 day, maybe rest 3 days, so you're at the same level, and then do it again, and then look at the performance. It's really simple. See, do you work better with more oxygen coming in, or do you work better with less oxygen coming in? I mean, we know the answer.
By yourself riding a bike, you have to mask on. Unbelievable. Okay, now it gets worse. So we went from bad to worse, and we're going to get even worse. So they have created health hotels for those affected with the cerveza sickness. You will be quarantined in a health hotel against your will, not in your house. You can't stay in your house because I know who lives with you. I know all the people that are staying in your house. You will be quarantined in a health hotel, forced quarantine. So the PCR test is completely ridiculous because there's so many false positives. It can find anything in the human body. You keep going down layers and layers and layers, and you can find anything. You can find 1/16th, diamonds in your body. I mean, one trillionth. Everything is within the human body that is within the world. So the PCR test is basically invalid at a certain level. And if you are not that you have the cerveza sickness, you've tested positive for the cerveza sickness. I feel fine. I feel great. I'm healthy. I'm actually just head outside to go for a run. I'm going to go for a swim. I'm going to go for a ride. No, you're going to a health hotel. You've tested positive for the cerveza sickness.
See what they're doing, and this is another thing that why people who know what's going on flee these types of societies, because they know their ability to produce is severely hampered because now they don't have due process of the
you
law.
read my mind. I was just going to get into due
Oh,
process, Warner.
yeah, so due process, basically you're innocent until proven guilty. So now, I mean, Mari and I have been in the military and other organizations, and it's like no one is ever 100% unless you're God. No one is 100% accurate. So if they make an assessment on you, let's just say no PCR test, they make an assessment, this incorrect assessment, it's like boom,
Health
done,
hotel,
into the
Warner.
hotel. So let's look at this for a second. Let's say you're running a business right now. So let's look at Australia. They said no construction workers can work. Let's look at us, me, I'm always bringing back to the business standpoint. Well, if you have a business with a bunch of people, right? 80 people, 100 people rely on you. You're the CEO of a business. And now the next thing you know, you're in the health hotel and they have no idea you're going to get out. And they're like, well, you can't use a cell phone. How are you supposed to run your business? What if you're in your business and someone else tests positive and it pulls them out? We've seen what it's done to the US. Factories open, close, this way, that way. It's creating this confusion. And the one thing that the only area where you want confusion as a business is where Mario and I are, where we're growing, we're working on product market fit. It's confusing as all get out. But when you make a business after it gets the product market fit and it's scaling, now you make that business put a lot of uncertainty and confusion around it. You're going to annihilate most businesses, and that will support you.
This is where,
Mari,
well, this is going to
get a little triggered.
Where it's going to get real dark. The military has now been deputized to become law enforcement. So edict enforcement, not law enforcement. Edict enforcement. So the military, it's martial law. The military has stepped up in Australia and is now providing a type of force that may enter your home, an Australian man's home, an Australian woman's home, without a warrant and arrest people without due process. The military and the police can now enter your home without a warrant, no warrant necessary, don't have to go to a judge, don't have to go to court, and arrest people without due process. Edict or law, Warner?
It's another edict. And all that's going to do is, like Mari and I are talking about, is you're assessing your business. Do you have the freedom each and every day to go execute on your business? A fear, here's a hidden one that a lot of people don't see. Even if you don't get nailed by any of this stuff, the fear of getting nailed can almost sink your business, because you're thinking, well, is it going to be me next? Your employees are thinking, they're more fearful most of the day than being productive individuals focusing on your business. And so it's the same thing as like if you have like a really, really bad boss. I mean, this is worse, but if you have a really, really not bad boss, but ineffective boss, it's a tyrant. And we've had those in the military. They just make your life a living hell because everything is about them and you're never doing enough. And you're running the whole operation on fear. When if you look at the best operations, they run on creativity, love. People feel like they're part of a team. There's no fear. When they feel like they can express their best selves. When you create this type of environment, it's literally like taking weed killer and spraying your organic plants with it.
Can the police in Dana Point come into your condo there and arrest you without a warrant? Can they come in? Can the police even enter your apartment in Dana Point? Can they enter your apartment without a warrant?
No, and there's millions of lawyers in the U.S. that would love to jump all over that if they did.
There'd be lawyers coming out of the woodwork to pro bono to attack the Dana Point Police Department. Can the military, can the 1st Marine Division hike up I-5 and enter your condo in Dana Point?
No, and there's a law on the U.S. books. I forget the name. What's that law that the U.S. or the CIA is not allowed?
Military shall not be used. It shall not be used against the people. There's a Latin term. You got to talk to an attorney. I'm not one, nor to play one on TV. Okay, it gets even darker. Okay, so we're going to go back to Australia. We're going to stop getting fired up about our own country. Okay, back to Australia. They have so they have health hotels where they can hold you for a period of weeks in a hotel. And if you still have a runny nose, you're going to go to a national resilience center. A national resilience center, a concentration camp, a concentration of people that will be held indefinitely because they are
Let me ask you a
infected.
question.
They're
How are
infected.
you
They got a
supposed to
runny
how are you supposed
nose.
to run a
Yeah.
business in this type of environment?
Well, you can't. Well, you can. Let me say this. Some people, some of my autistic nephews are going to look this term up. Work will make you free.
What type of
Work will make
work?
you free, Warner. Whatever they want you to do in these national resilience centers, whatever kind of
So
work you're going to be put to do. I mean, you got to do something all day. You got a
let's look at
runny
that term
nose.
freedom.
You
Freedom
have a
for a
runny
second
nose.
is without infringing on someone else's. See, here's freedom. Freedom in its core is this. It's your ability to go out and produce and build whatever is that you're interested in building, and not infringing on someone else's rights through murder or subjugation or tyranny or slavery. It's your ability. That's freedom. See, they coin these terms. If you see, the key is in good business. A lawyer knows this. If you craft any good legal document, a great lawyer crafts a document where he sees every single angle. The language is very important. So what Mario and I are supporting our viewers in right now is really start listening to the language. If they say work is free, ask what type of work. Is it the work that you want to do? Well, that doesn't free me. I want to do my work. That's why
No, no, Warner, no. You're in a national resilience center, and you will do the work, the forced labor that they tell you to do, not the work you choose to do. They will force you to do the work that they designed for you because you're an infected person. And when do you become so? Without your will, we can hold you in a health hotel. If you still have a runny nose and we determine you're still infected, we can hold you in a national resilience center where you'll be doing forced work, not your work, forced labor. And what is the basis for my release? When do I get to leave? When you say I'm not affected, when you say I'm not infected, I get to leave. I feel fine. I feel great. I want to leave.
from Europe that came here, the main reason they came here was for freedom to do what they wanted to do. It wasn't just being like, being these foolhardy individuals that were just going to subjugate and kill everyone. It's like freedom to pursue, creating the goods and services that they wanted to create, whether it was living on a homestead or living in a city or doing whatever it was. They had the freedom to take their God-given talents and do it with all their might. Whatever your hand finds to do it with all your might. That's the key. Whatever you love to do, that's what's great about this country. You go do it with all your might. And now when you say in this other country and they're saying,
No, you'll be in a national resilience center, not all your might. You'll be doing forced labor until we deem you not infected. If you're an infected person, you'll be in a national resilience center.
they've given their power over to that government when they don't realize that they're the ones that gave the power to that government. They've given it back. A powerful business has its own power within the business. A powerful community runs the community the way they see fit. A powerful county, powerful government, powerful state, it runs it as it sees fit. When you have one individual telling you how it should be, that's like a red flag to get on a boat or on a plane and go elsewhere. Here's the key.
If you have those means, what is the key, Warner?
The key is here's the real key. If you look around you and all the individuals are like, oh, let's just do it. Oh, don't worry about it. That's the key to get the heck out of there. If you have a bunch of individuals that are like, no, this is bullshit, we're coming up against this, then you think, okay, depending on your family and your situation, security, whatever, you think, all right, I'm gonna stay here, I'm gonna work through this. But if everyone is not into it, that's a key differentiator because the power comes from the people. And if the people don't have the resolve to overcome whatever is the obstacle coming against them, then that is a decision in your mind. Hey, listen, I don't align with these individuals. I'm going somewhere else where I align with individuals because it's the people around you that create the entrepreneurial environments. And Mario, I've talked about this. Like the US could be this kind of crazy spot, but when we look at it, the US has the most, I was in LA when they shut down these restaurants. I've never seen more entrepreneurial individuals like work around the restrictions and like work outside to setting up tables in a dang parking lot or shifting their whole restaurant from a restaurant to to like literally a warehouse to store goods and services that they were selling. They were like moving and shifting. Now, would we be in those businesses? No. Our point is this: in America, you have individuals that think quick and they're moving. They're like, oh, we're getting nailed here, here, here. Okay, we're gonna go here, 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 and there. You want to be around those types of individuals in the world. Individuals that are like, nah, we do not want to be held down. We're gonna move around it.
Yeah, you don't want to find yourself in a national resilience center. Okay, it gets darker, Warner. So we dropped anchor a little bit on that point. Children are being forced to take the clot shot against the will of their parents. So let me read that again. Children are being forced to take the clot shot or injections against the will of their parents. New South Wales, 24,000 children were held in a stadium and compelled to take medical injections, mass injections of 24,000 children in New South Wales. Edict or law? Yeah, you have a couple young men in your life. Could the government? Does the government have a law that they can take your children against your will and give them medical injections?
They've been creating all sorts of crazy laws in the U.S., but here's the answer to that. It depends on the will of the people. We are the ones that give them the power to create the laws. So if they do something unlawfully, like a perfect example in Russia. They said, no, we're not playing ball. And they did it peacefully. So we won't shop there. See, it's like we talked about the other day when we were sitting at the park. You talked about there's certain communities that cops don't go into.
We're going to take your money away in Australia. So fines, a minimum fine is 1,000. So for these violations, I didn't wear my mask for my 2-hour bike ride. So that would be 2 violations. 1, I was outside for longer than 1 hour. And 2, I wasn't wearing a mask on my bike ride. So that would be 1,000. Minimum fine is 1,000 Australian dollars up to 5,000 for your first infraction. And then unlimited. They have the ability, unlimited amount of money they can find you. So if you just say, you know what, I'm just not going to do any of it. You just send me a check. Send me, you know what, put it on my tab. There's no cap, 50 grand. Okay, you know what? I'm going to live free in Australia. My yearly penalty for doing whatever I want is $50,000. Okay, all right. I can choose to say, you know what? That's a tax I'm willing to pay. There is unlimited ability to take away financial freedom or financial resources for you. There's no cap on the amount of fines you can be, I guess, given from the Australian authorities. Unlimited amount of dollars can be taken away from you. Definitely an edict. Lockdown protesters. This gets pretty ugly too. Lockdown protesters cannot cross a border between states to assemble. You have to stay in your state. So Australia has several states. You can't cross a state, let alone go outside of 1 to 5 kilometers. But to assemble, to protest, like you said, you show up in mass in front of the prime minister, in front of your representative, your elected official. You show up in mass at their house and say, resign now. I want your resignation now. Enough men do that. These people step down. You're not allowed to, Warner. You're not allowed to assemble across state lines. Peaceful protesters are being arrested. There's people that are showing up peacefully. They're not taking boomsticks. They're not being violent. These are peaceful protesters showing up to dissent, to show dissent together, to collectively show dissent. They're being arrested in Australia. No due process.
Yeah, so basically what's happening is it goes back to, I keep belaboring the point, but it goes back to your ability to live freely. And what that means is your ability to produce value and produce that value in terms of goods and services. And all this stuff points to is it's just dampening your ability. Okay, so now what if I'll give you a perfect example. What if I'm a businessman? I have to walk through that protest because I have a meeting on the other side, and they grab me. It's like, oh, $1,000 fine. No. I wasn't here for that. I'm doing a meeting with my buddy over here. I have nothing to do with this. So, right, what happens as business individuals, even if you're not involved in it, now you start getting, I'm not condoning it, but I'm saying you get pulled into it. So everything you're doing on a daily basis, let's think about it this way. When you're building anything like a business, it requires all your efforts, right? I know with a family, some of the efforts of the family, some of the efforts of building the business. But now when they have you only have 40 to 60 hours in a day. Well, now if your day is now taking up that 40 hours trying to figure out which way to travel, go under this law, go under that law, trying to figure out the laws, a few hours talking with friends, you've now spent 40 hours just trying to navigate these arbitrary edicts when that 40 hours is better spent, more effectively spent building your business, enriching someone else's life. So basically, because of these arbitrary edicts, they're dampening your ability to freely express your goods and services through the value that you provide. That's how dangerous it is. This what is going on right now is one of the biggest destroyers of productivity, as you're seeing. I mean, they're hitting it from all sides. So if you're committed to financial freedom, Australia is not financially free, not even close. Maybe small areas in the bush where they're providing for themselves, or way out in the Great Barrier Reef, or maybe way out on the western side where there's just a few dudes and they're like, oh, we're not going in there. You send the army in there, we're not going in there.
But Koji Beach, or Sydney is not financially free right now. Not even close. When you have national resilience centers and health hotels. If Warner, we're to get into this, but if health hotels opened up in the state of California, we're out of here. If California state resilience centers opened up, we're out of here. Hawaii, New York, we're out of here. Okay, so I said this and I want to repeat myself. Our leaders, our elected leaders in this country have warned us, and I take it serious. I believe what they say when they say this. We are going to have a dark winter. Right now in the Northern Hemisphere, it's August. It's warm. It's 72, between 72 and 82 degrees every day in Southern California, right by the beach. A little hotter as you get into the Inland Empire or out into the desert. But when they say, Warner, there is a dark winter coming, you and I believe them. We're gonna take them at their word. You tell me there's a dark winter coming, I believe you. So I want to leave you with some hope. My younger nephews that are listening, or some people in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Great Britain. I want to give you some really practical advice of what I think, or what Warner and I could come up with, are some of your options. So what are your options? I think you have about 5 options, and we'll break these each down. But as Warner was alluding to, is you form really, really tight communities. In America, these would be Mennonites. These would be the Amish. These would be fundamental Baptists, fundamental Mormons, Hasidic Jews, special forces men who live up on mountaintops together in northern Idaho. These would be motorcycle gangs. These would be 1% motorcycle gangs. These are extremely tight-knit communities that police their own. A motorcycle gang is run administratively and tactically like a military outfit. There's men in there is special forces and military service members that have all moved up to northern Idaho, and they own huge, vast pieces of property, and they have formed paramilitary organizations. They have formed a tight-knit community that polices itself. Warner, thoughts on that first option is to join a community, or become part of, or create a community of tight-knit people that police themselves and basically form a no-go zone.
Yeah, so when it comes to leadership or building a business, it's based on, like Mario and I said, there's agreements. And behind those agreements is obviously your value, but there's a power. There's a power, like you're doing what you said you would do. And you're living by a certain set of principles. That's what the Constitution is. So when you get together with these groups of people, you say, we're in this organization, our agreement is we're living freely here. We shall defend that. We're going to have free commerce here. We're going to have some sort of monetary system, whatever we agree that is. We're going to treat everyone justly. No discrimination. No discrimination on the color of your skin. Everyone who comes here, the point is the powerful agreements. This is what brings people together, because you have to understand that the individuals running the show, or who you think are running the show, they're not. We're running the show. They're weak. They're weak individuals. They're just weak. They're scared behind the scenes. They're just doing what they're told to do. It's like they have a big group. But I promise you, as soon as that group starts falling, they all start scurrying like rats or cockroaches. They're freaking out. Like certain individuals that have boats and private yachts, they're gone, man. They're scurrying in the mountains. They're scurrying in their hiding spots. These guys aren't strong dudes. So if you can project force with a group of people that can clearly see who's not in it to abide by their agreements. For example, someone comes in their village, or a force comes in, they're like, hey boys, these guys are coming in and they're not interested in our agreements. We're going to live up to our agreements because we're a powerful organization, and you're not coming in. What that does is, for any outside force or individuals that want to come in and mess with those agreements, they're like, nah, I'm going to go somewhere else. I'm going to pick the weaker targets. That's what these guys are doing right now. They're destroying businesses so they can get you weaker, get you more subsistent on them. They're destroying the middle class. They're getting you hooked on their systems versus being self-sufficient. And that's where it's kind of pointing to. When you have a self-sufficient group based on strong ties, agreements, very hard to penetrate that type of group.
I'll be real specific. The number is about 1,000. To have that kind of, to project that kind of force is about 1,000. Whether it's a motorcycle gang, Hasidic Jews, the Amish in Pennsylvania, Mennonites in North Dakota, fundamental Baptists down in the South, fundamental Mormons out in Utah, it's about 1,000. If you're in a territory and you have about 1,000 men, not including women and children, you have 1,000 men. You don't show up uninvited to a 1% motorcycle gang meeting. When they have 1,000 men, you don't show up there uninvited to talk about edicts. That's not going to happen. Northern Idaho, you have 1,000 special forces and military veterans living up in a county in Northern Idaho. You don't show up uninvited to their meetings. Option number two. I think that's the best. So going back, number one is to have 1,000 people in your community, in a tight-knit community that polices their own. You'll be left alone. Now, be no threat to the government. The Amish are no threat to the government, to overthrow the government. The Hasidic Jews in New York are no threat to the government. You're not trying to overthrow the government. You're trying to be left alone. You're policing yourself, and you will be. You will be. You have 1,000 men that you police yourself. You'll be left alone. The second best option, if you can't join a community, you don't have 1,000 men you can join. You don't have none of those groups we just mentioned or other derivatives work for you. The second best option is to homestead next to other homesteaders. Is to go to a community, to own a small piece of parcel of land, 3 to 5 acres, 10 acres, whatever it is, whatever you can afford, and provide value to the other homesteaders. Do something, whatever your hand finds to do something with all your might that provides value to the other homesteaders. You will be accepted into that community. I can milk a cow. I can grow eggs. I can grow vegetables. I can hunt. I can can meat. I can do so. Second point is the second best option, or the second option for you, is to join a homesteading community, own some acres next to other homesteaders. Don't have to agree with on the religion. You don't have to agree on what kind of motorcycle you're riding. What are your thoughts on that, Warner?
So great societies like this society are built on hard work. They keep going over and over this reiterating. It's built on what value you talked about it, whether it's doing eggs or milk or building a fence or a house, whatever it is, provide on what value do you provide. And you provide value when at the end of the day, you're exhausted and you're tired. In this current society, we've built up this system where people are getting paid to stay at home and do nothing. That wouldn't fly in this society that we're talking about. And you actually won't. You'll find, even if, let's say you're an individual listening to this show and you're doing that, you'll find after a year or two, or maybe even a few months, you're going to find real empty because you didn't take your value and produce that value. So why is a homestead? Why am I talking about value in a homestead and working hard? Because what's going on in the current society now, like we saw in Australia, or we're seeing in Australia, they're ripping you of your ability to produce hard work. Just take your efforts and focus on what you want to focus on every day. Produce value, work hard each day, and then at the end of it, create this financial freedom and then do what you relax and enjoy what you like to do. So if you're in a society where they're going to start ripping that from you, then you're going to go back and create that society again. And the second thing is like a homestead where you're producing something, someone else is producing something. You're producing everything that these individuals are using as leverage against you. So that's what we're all talking about. These different communities are just different like power structures, but it's all based to do one thing: to take back your power, to take back your ability. This is the most important thing, to survive for yourself and your family. And that's these individuals over here in Australia are saying, no, we're giving you your ability to survive and now we're taking away from you. If you don't want it, you come with us down this like rabbit hole into these camps. No. That's how you get out of it. Big group, small group. Yeah, I agree. What's the third one?
Number 3, we have a gentleman that we know, Steve Englander. He's a public figure. I'll mention his name. He lives down in Costa Rica. I asked him recently, what is your interaction with the government? He says, I only see him at the airport. I have no interaction with any government other than when I go through the airport. So number 3 is move to a poor country with limited government enforcement. But there's a caveat: bring your own security. Your security is your responsibility when you move to a very poor country. You'll have more freedom in a really poor country. Now, there's not as much economic opportunity, but there's going to be more freedom because the government is simply too poor to be able to police everyone. So you simply move on to the top of a mountaintop in Costa Rica, and you have very limited interaction with the government other than when you go through a government checkpoint, which is there's two international airports in Costa Rica, one in San Juan. I think that's the capital. Is that right? San Juan, and Liberia, I think, is the other one you can.
Yeah, and here's what I want to say about this in terms of agreements. If you have governments or individuals that aren't respecting your rights, here's what Mari and our advice is: don't go anywhere near them, because now you're giving them, like TSA or someone else, you're giving them your rights to go through their system. Get off of their system and build your own system. If the system's falling apart and they're unwilling to do anything about it, this is what Mari and I are talking about. Shift back to it all. Just always go, just keep the system the same. It's real simple. Can I each day get up, whether that's producing content, right? Or if it's producing eggs, can I get up each day and provide some sort of value for 46 to 60 hours, or each day, probably 8 to 10 hours? Can I provide that value freely? If the answer is no, go somewhere else. If you cannot provide value freely, that's why we're talking about these communities, because you will be able to in these communities. And what these communities provide is what Mari's talking about, is security.
There you go. So yeah, I'm moving from the best case scenario to the worst case scenario. So these are getting harder. These. So if you can't do the community, I can't do the homestead. Now I'm moving to another country that's poor, where I can't afford a little bit of property. You got to bring your own security because you don't speak the language. You don't really fit in. You got to bring your own boys down there to Costa Rica or some Nicaragua, Honduras, Belize, El Salvador. Bring your own security. Okay, number 4. We'll keep going here. I want to kind of drop anchor here. No pun intended. On the fourth best option is van life or boat life. I have access to a boat in North Carolina. If you look at a map of Morehead City or Beaufort, North Carolina, you're 6 miles away from being in international waters, or 12 miles away from being in international waters from Beaufort, North Carolina. You're a 1 hour, 30-minute boat ride to being in international waters. It's very hard to lock down the ocean. Same with van life. There is almost unlimited ways of getting out of each state in America. State of California, for instance, there's thousands and thousands of ways to exit this state with we call them like sprinter vans or adventure vans, adventure mobiles, explorer type.
Global Expedition is one.
There we go.
One company.
So if you have the ability to move, if you basically are like the wind, you move with the wind, it becomes very hard to lock you down. If you have a sailboat or a van or a pickup truck with a camper shell in the back as your plan B, it becomes very, very difficult. If you have that type of, it's not a piece of property, it's not 5 acres, but it's the next best thing. That thing can move like the wind. It's very hard to control you. It's impossible to lock down the ocean. You can't control the entire ocean, and even roads. A van, it's very, very difficult to block every single road. So if you were in Sydney, if you were in Coogee Beach, and you had a sportsmobile, you simply roll. When this thing happens, you simply drive out to the middle of the desert. You go to Darwin. Thoughts on van life, boat life, Warner?
Yeah. So basically, what we're creating is, it always goes back to this thing called agreements. If you're in a certain situation, and let's say you own a house, yet your agreement with the government has changed and you haven't agreed to it, so it becomes an edict. Well, now you're in a pickle because you have this house and you can't move, right? So you have no mobility. And you're in this jurisdiction where they can kind of lock you down. Because think about it, at the end of the day, all these cops and everyone else, they've got to go back to their homes at night. Mari and I are in the military. They have to resupply. They have to move. They have injuries. They have everything else like us. So the more an environment, like I was talking about before, the more an environment doesn't allow you to be creative 6 to 8 to 10 hours out of the day, you just start getting hampered down. You want to have the mobility to move into a more austere environment, because you want to go where no one else wants to go, where it's very hard to live or it's hard to get into. It may be nice living, but it's hard to get there, or it's hard to survive there. You want to go from where it's easy. If a totalitarian system is popping up, which basically a totalitarian system means they're not honoring your agreements, who you are, your right to freely produce goods and services. You want that ability to be able to move somewhere else. That mobility is, I mean, give you an example, like we learned when we were shooting, and Mario's a much better tactician at this than me. When you're running straight away, you're an easy target because I can just time you. But if you're zigzagging left and right, you are exceptionally hard to hit because I've got to constantly be moving with you. That's what you want to think about in mobility. You want to be just moving. Oh, there's a checkpoint here. I'm going there. I'm going here. This might sound insane to individuals that we know that are listening to this podcast and may be like, oh, Warner and Mario have lost their minds. All I ask is that you put this in the back of your brain housing group.
That's right.
And you just store it there. It doesn't like do you any disservice just to keep this information back here and just mull over it. Just think like, hey, Warner said something about if I can't work 6 hours a day, now I'm only working 4 hours a day. What do you say? Oh, get more mobile. Then maybe you take an action. All we're saying is we're giving you advice. And here's the thing, it might sound crazy. Go look at the history of the world. It's not crazy. The freest place on this world has been the US. It's the best entrepreneurial experience in the face of this earth. And it's kind of crumbling before our eyes. So before you say, oh, you're crazy, go look at the rest of history. Go look at the chances that the US, out of the measly few thousand years that we've been around, or people probably arguing with me with that one, but I don't even want to go down that road. But anyway, I'm going to cut that out. The point is that go look, don't get caught in your little bubble. Go out, look at history, look at everything around you and go, wait a second, is what these guys saying? Is there some validity to this? This is for the individuals that aren't kind of woken the heck up right now.
Yeah. So when you're talking about national resilience centers, just do a little deep dive on history, folks, and figure out what that actually means. That's a concentration camp. Okay. Warner and I have bad days. So we're going to go to number 5, unless you have anything else to add on van life, boat life. You hammered that. Okay. Number 5. Warner and I have bad days. We have, just like everybody else, we have bad days, and it's okay. It's occasionally have a bad day. It's okay. Hopefully we don't have we're not having a bad day at the same time. That's fine. If Warner's having a bad day, no problem. I'm having a great day. I bring him back up. I'm having a bad day. Hopefully Warner's not having a bad day, but occasionally we both have bad days and it's on the same day. And we say things to each other. I just want to go off grid. And then we come to our senses and say, oh, that's the last resort. This is the last resort. And you don't want to go off grid 25 years too early or 50 years too early. But this is the last resort, is when it completely melts down. I can't even go without a jab passport. I can't even go fill up the diesel tank to my boat or my RV. I literally can't, I'm locked down. As you walk, you literally get on your pack mule or you walk or your bicycle and you go off grid. You leave. You can walk. You can actually walk from, if they completely lock down Costa Rica, you could actually walk from Costa Rica. I can't get to the airport. I can't get out of here. I can't swim. I don't have a boat. I can't drive out of here. I can't get gas. I can't go to the airport without a jab passport. I can walk. I can literally walk. Nicaragua is just north of you. You can walk into Nicaragua and you can keep walking north and you'll hit Wyoming. Thoughts on that, Warner?
Yeah, so let's look at the roots of what financial freedom is. We talk a lot about creating financial freedom, but what is it really? And George Gammon kind of points to this on his YouTube channel. If you don't know who he is, check him out. Great channel. It's your ability to survive. So what's the number one thing? Water. Water is beyond getting your mind, your body straight. That's what drives everything. But now getting into what fuels you and what moves you, it's water. Because you don't have water, you're going to die. Then it's food. You can go a long time without food, right? Depending on how much fat stores you have in your body. But water will kill you quick. So water, food, right? Then we go into like clothing, depending on the environment you're in, right? Different in clothing. Shoes, if you're going to walk, you need good shoes unless you've hardened your feet up. Mobility, shelter, all these things, if you think about it, let's say in this current world right now, you're creating all this money to do what? To pay for water, to pay for food, right? To pay for clothing, to pay for mobility. So what we want you to start doing is when you're creating this financial freedom, start thinking about each of those areas, like the quality of your water, the quality of your food. What are the different forms of clothing you have? What are the different forms of what Mario's talking about? Mobility. We all think we're just going to get in a car. Walking is like the age-old way to get anywhere. Put a backpack on. See, the thing about walking, which Mario's talking about in terms of mobility, is it's one of the hardest ways. I mean, just take Afghanistan for a second. Those goat herders up in the mountains. It's the hardest way to get someone. You're just literally walking. You can change course. You can get under a rock. You can get under trees. You can hide under weather. You're going at this slow pace, but walking, and most people discount this. Mara and I have done a lot of it. I spent a lot of time in the woods. It's one of the most effective ways to evade anything. Say, for example, you're trying to get out of Russia or China, just start walking. Like, I know you may just walk 1,000 miles. Just go over the border where no one else is willing to go. I mean, look at the Von Trapp family. They walked out of Austria, right? They literally walked over a mountain. So walking is essential. And I know we're kind of getting more into like prepper, but as a society starts degrading, your financial freedom, instead of you getting it from other people and you're building up this monetary system to build it, now we're shifting to creating it ourselves. And those 5 areas are all designed for one thing and one thing alone, for you to survive. And the last one, off grid, is the hardest. But do you want to be off grid, or you want to be under the dictates in some camp being
a national resilience
I'll be
center?
Off grid. And this all points to financial freedom. And what is the root of financial freedom? It's your freedom to produce financial is really just resources. Your finances enable you to buy resources. So we're really talking about resource freedom when things fall apart. Value freedom. There's all these different ways to say it, but can you freely produce food, goods, and services for yourself? Yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, last point I'll just say, before Warner and I are sitting in a prison cell in a national resilience center, we'll be bow hunting in the backcountry of Wyoming. Enough said. Okay, if you've made it this far, I'd like to ask one thing. For the viewers that made it this far, I just have one favor to ask you. I would like you to send this to one person in Australia. Find somebody you know on LinkedIn, on social media, somewhere in your network. I would ask you to send this video to one person in Australia. So everybody that's made it this far, all my autistic nephews that have made it this far, please send this video to one person in Australia. That's all I have. Warner, over to you.
Yeah, and when that video gets to that individual, you may be like burdened down with like just so much fear. I just want you to take one action every day that moves the needle to more freedom. Just one action. Like maybe today it's like, oh man, I'm locked down in my house. Maybe it's just like next time you go to the store, you're buying a backpack. You're loading that back. Maybe it's a map. Maybe you're coordinating with someone, right? Just one action. You'd imagine, and then maybe some days you do 2 actions, 3, but get proficient at one action. And then by the end of like 30 to 60 days, that's 60 new actions you've taken, or 60 consistent actions that are producing results. Don't get caught in this fear. Take one action each day towards freedom. That's towards financial freedom, resource freedom, value freedom, whatever you want to call it. That's it for me. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you for listening to this podcast. We invite you to get to know us by clicking on our LinkedIn profiles in the description of this video. Please subscribe, hit the bell notification for future updates, and share this content with your networks. Thank you for your valuable time and insights. We greatly appreciate it.